Today's gospel is a very interesting gospel in the sense that it is the reflection of what we find in Lord's Prayer. We all follow Christ because we want salvation. We want to, at one point, spend our time with God, be with God, and be embraced by God. In today's gospel, in the beginning, I want to pay attention to this one thing. The one person who had a debt to his master had to pay it all, or the master said to his servants, go sell his wife, his children, and everything he has, and pay it back to me. So sometimes when we think of the debt, it just said 1,000 denarii, but in reality, for the person who was in debt, the debt was infinite, because in the result of it, he was to lose his wife and his children, which you cannot put price on. So in reality, it wasn't 1,000 denarii or 1,000 gold pieces. The debt was infinite, because it was the cost of his children and of his wife. So if we want to understand how much we owe or how much we have offended God, we need to look at it from that perspective. It is a price that comes from losing everything valuable that we have in our lives. Everything, including our children. And God's mercy is equally infinite, because the Master says, just forgive him. It doesn't matter how big his debt is to me, how much he has offended me, forgive all of it. And then this is paralleled to a small amount, 100 denarii. A brother who owed 100 denarii was not forgiven. This man who was just forgiven infinite amount of debt could not forgive a tiny amount to his brother. As I said in my sermon in the bulletin, our salvation is in our own hands. God has the infinite mercy, but to attract God's mercy to ourselves for our salvation, we have to fulfill that one line that is in the Lord's Prayer. Forgive our debts according to how we forgive others who are in debt to us. Our salvation is dependent upon God's mercy that is infinite. There is no question about that. God is willing to forgive like this master in today's parable. But it depends on how we exercise the same as we ask from God. And at the end, this servant was thrown into the dungeon and was said that you cannot come out of there until you pay the last denarii. Well, we just established his debt was infinite, which means that he can never pay his debt. Which means that he will infinitely stay in the prison until he comes to his senses and understand what it means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Until he understands that he has to soften his heart so that the mercy of God will go in there and pour out towards his brethren. Then, only then, his infinite debt will be forgiven. Not that he can pay it back to the master. He can never pay it. We can never pay our debt to God. We did not create ourselves, and we do not have control over everything in our life. So our infinite debt is dependent on forgiving a tiny debt that our brethren have against us. All we have to do is be forgiving, and we will receive an infinite mercy of God into our life. now and forever, to the ages of ages. Amen.